Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again to this new episode of Not Stopping Now in this version 2025 that is not stopping now for the ocean. This webinar where we dive into marine conservation and marine biodiversity. As you know, this is a collaboration between the Climate Ambassador Program, which I belong, the Heritage Council, and the Biodiversity Officer Network. My name is Mariana Coleman, and I am a Climate Action Officer for Antashka, and I'm organizing this in partnership with my colleague, Marina Mulligan. Marina?
Thanks a million. Yeah, my name is Marina. I'm the Biodiversity Officer for Waterford City and County Council, and we have a huge number of collaborators on this special episode for Heritage Week. This is episode 3 of the series, and it's kind of designed for you to have a look into the world of marine research, the habitats of Irish coastal waters, and meet some of the people involved in working in protecting the ocean. But the most important part of all of this is to try and inspire you to take a little bit more action, whether that's in your own local area or your local coastal beach for the species that we find here. This webinar series is called Not Stopping Now. Our first one was focused on the resilience of nature on land, and now we've delved into the water. So we're looking at our drive to protect that. So we invite you to join us in speaking up for these ecosystems. They're incredibly important, really diverse and filled with life. And they do provide us with oxygen, food, and many other resources, as well as the biodiversity that they're really important for. They have an untold influence on our culture as an island, and especially for Heritage Week, when we're looking at our connecting to our foundations, the marine area of Ireland has huge, huge connections to our culture and our history.
Exactly. And for this special Heritage Week, we, as Marina described, we go into marine research. And for that, we have 2 amazing speakers today. They're going to be talking about the research they have been involved in and they are connected with. I'm going to quickly introduce both of them. I'm going to start with Anthony Adu-Gyamfi. I really hope I'm not butchering your name, Anthony, but I'm doing my best. So to give you a background of Anthony, he's an ecologist and PhD researcher at the Atlantic Technological University in Galway. He is studying the role of seaweed aquaculture in marine biodiversity and ecosystem function. He holds a master's in environmental science from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, specializing in the aquatic ecology, and a degree in laboratory technology from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana as well, specializing in biochemistry. Anthony has more than 12 years of experience in terrestrial and marine plant ecology, ecological fieldwork, and laboratory analysis, and he has worked as an assistant curator and senior laboratory technologist at the Ghana Herbarium in the Department of Plant and Environment Biology at the University of Ghana, and as an aquatic biologist at the Water Research Institute. And his research encompasses marine ecology, ethnobotany, biodiversity monitoring, and sustainable aquaculture development. And our second speaker, she's going to be the first one today, but it's Eleanor Turner. She's a friend of the house because she collaborated with us in the past as well in the first season of this webinar. She's now the Kerry County Council Biodiversity Officer, and she's going to be talking about the marine habitats and Asian shark research, but also to give you a background of her. She started her career with an undergrad in marine biology from the Bangor University in North Wales. That was 15 years ago, so another person with a lot of experience here. After graduating and traveling in the US and Australia, she came back to complete an internship with the Marine Dimensions in Bray. There was where her interest in skates and rays first grew, and she helped with the managing of the Perth Search Project, a really cool marine citizen science project that is still going on today. And following that, Eleanor moved back to Kerry and worked with the Marine Awareness and Education Organization called Synergy. During this time, she was involved in several other projects, including the Marine Explorer Education Program, supported by the Marine Institute, further research into skate and ray nursery areas with the Marine Dimensions founded by the Marine Institute, BIM and EPA funded project working on repurposing marine plastic and another research project funded also by EPA, working on the Sustainable Development Goals. So she's also a member of the Irish Whales and Dolphin Group and volunteer in the committee for the Irish Elasmo Branch Group. Although her role now covers all the biodiversity in Kerry County Council, she still has a keen interest in the ocean and ocean research, and will share with us today the projects she has been able to connect and support as Biodiversity Officer in Kerry.
That is such a huge wealth of experience. And I think we're really lucky to have two incredible people on the podcast, and you said webinar today. So just to kind of give you as an audience an idea of what to expect for the next hour, Eleanor is going to introduce us to the marine area of Ireland and the work of the angel shark research in Tralee Bay. Around 1:30 or 1:35, we'll hand over to Anthony then to bring us into the world of his research on marine life found in seaweed farms off the west coast. And they're adjacent to seagrass beds, so a little bit about biodiversity there. And at 1:50, I'll be jumping back in for a Q&A. So we'll host a Q&A with both researchers and biodiversity officer when we end up. So you'll see us back on screen later on. But before we start, remember to use that Q&A function that is down below to ask any of your questions rather than the chat if you have. And if you want any audio assistance or captions, there's a CC button at the very bottom of the screen that you can press. So with all that said, Eleanor, the virtual floor is over to you. We're going to step away now and let you delve us into the marine area of Ireland.
Thanks so much, Marina, and Mariana. Thanks for the introduction there. So I'm Biodiversity Officer with Kerry County Council. So that covers a huge remit within the local authority around biodiversity. But of course, as Mariana introduced there, I suppose my first area of interest was the sea marine research, and specifically marine education and awareness, which is what I'm really lucky to still be able to work in today in my role with Kerry County Council. So I wanted to start it off with a bit of an introduction to the ocean. One of the programs I worked on previously was the Explorers Education Program that was funded by the Marine Institute and has an absolutely amazing team working all over Ireland. They offer education workshops to primary schools specifically, and they do teacher training as well. So their education package is founded on 7 ocean literacy principles. And so starting with those kind of gives you a nice step into why we're still researching what we're researching and what the significance of that is. So to start off with the first one, Earth has just one big ocean with many features. And I found this really lovely projection of the world on a map that is centered on the oceans. So the light blue here you can see is actually the world ocean. So there is just one ocean, it's all connected. And that's really significant for working with migratory species in terms of invasive species and how they get transported, and lots of other things that happen in the ocean. The second principle, ocean and life on the ocean shape the features of the Earth. And the third one, the ocean is a major influence on weather and climate. And the fourth, the ocean makes Earth habitable. So there's so many things that the ocean does. Think of the impact of those winter storms we get on the West Coast. The ocean is providing oxygen through the plankton and their photosynthesis. There's a numerous ways that the ocean is having this impact on the globe as a whole. And the ocean supports a great diversity of life and ecosystems. I know some of the previous webinars in this series have focused on a few different areas of that. And we could be here all day trying to list them all. To be honest, there's so many different habitats and so many different species, and we're still discovering some, which is really, really interesting. The ocean and humans are inextricably connected. Ocean literacy principle number 6 there. I suppose this really speaks to the impact that the ocean has on us in our lives in terms of what it provides for us, but then also the impact that we have. I often used to ask students, if you took humans away from the ocean, what would the impact be? And largely they would think of the negative ways in which we impact the ocean and say, oh, well, the ocean might be doing a little better without us. And then you'd turn around and say, well, what if the ocean disappeared? How would we get on? And the obvious answer there is we wouldn't fare too well without it. So on to ocean literacy principle number 7, which is really where we're focusing today. The ocean is largely unexplored. It is absolutely massive. And there are still numerous areas that we don't know anything about. even around Ireland's oceans, there are a number of species that we don't have information on their distribution or their reproductive habits or their feeding habits or their migratory routes, or if they're even moving to other areas at all. I know Anthony later is going to talk about some of this sort of cutting edge research that he's doing in his PhD, looking at those kind of questions where we don't have the answers. And we're focusing a little on that in the research that we do in Kerry. I also really like to show this map here. So when we zone into Ireland, Ireland actually has a huge marine territory. It's almost 10 times the size of the land. And within that, there are significant areas for whales and dolphins. It's a migratory route. Basking sharks come up our west coast every year. There's deep water corals. There's numerous areas that are really, really fascinating and still have a lot of questions where we need answers. And this map was created by the Infomar project that was funded through the Marine Institute. And so they mapped all of Irish waters, and you can actually zoom in on some areas on their website. So it's worth checking out and having a look around because it's really interesting to see what the topography is like under the water. So to jump a little closer to home, for me anyways, we're going to look at Kerry. So this is a map highlighting the SACs in Kerry. So these kind of, I don't know what color you would call that, browny yellow color. These highlight the SACs. So an SAC is a special area of conservation. So these are part of the Natura 2000 network, and that's coming from the EU directives. So they're put in place to conserve certain species and certain habitats. So in Kerry, we have a large number that occur on the coast or include marine areas. And some of the qualifying interests, which are the reasons that these areas get designated. Just to highlight the River Shannon SAC here, we have otters and sandbanks and estuaries, mudflats and coastal lagoons, reefs, Atlantic salt meadows and Mediterranean salt meadows. So these are all different habitats that we're looking at. And then particular species would be the salmon and the otter and the bottlenose dolphin. Of course, I'm sure you've hopefully all heard of the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group and the Shannon Dolphin Research Project. We also have these areas here, which is the Kerry Head Shoal SAC, this one here, and the Mahari Island SAC. These are both designated for the reef habitats. We have the Blasket Islands SAC, which is designated for its reefs, the sea cliffs, submerged or partially submerged sea caves, and then harbour porpoise, and we're seeing grey seal here as well, which is really, really important. Where would we go next? Castlemaine Harbour SAC. I'm trying to move slowly south on the map, and then I'm going to jump back into Tralee Bay because I'm going to focus on Tralee Bay a little bit more. So some of the areas in Castlemaine, you'll see some of the habitats are being repeated. So we've seen estuaries before in some of the other SACs, mudflats and sandflats, some of the sea cliffs and the salt meadows. Here we're starting to see these embryonic shifting dunes and the shifting dune shorelines and fixed coastal dunes. Obviously here in Inch and in Ross Bay, we have some very important dune habitats there. Out here on the edge, we have Valentia Harbour, Portmagee Channel SAC. So this is designated for its mudflats and sandflats, its shallow inlets and bays, and the reef areas. Now, there is also research ongoing here with Sea Synergy on native oysters. So there is a relic population of native oysters there. So potentially some more interesting work to come from a local research project there. Down in Ballinskelligs Bay in the Inny Estuary, we're seeing the salt meadows again. And yeah, both Atlantic and Mediterranean salt meadows. And then here, this is actually where I grew up and where I live now. My house is around here somewhere looking out over the bay. So I'm very fortunate in the location. And in Kenmare Bay, we again have the shallow inlets and bays and the reefs, the salt meadows. We have shifting dunes and fixed coastal dunes here in Derrynane Bay. And then we're looking at the harbour porpoise, the otter, and the harbour seal as the protected species. Now, of course, that doesn't cover all of the species that are found in those areas. Those are just the ones that are listed in the EU Habitats Directive. Around the coast here, we have migratory routes for whales and dolphins. We see basking shark traveling up here. I know they're off Loop Head recently, and there's been a lot of interest in those. We have a wealth of other coastal habitats that support incredible marine biodiversity. And another thing I'd be sorry not to mention is the Park Nashunta Namara, which is the first marine national park that we have, the MPWS have designated. And it's really interesting that it covers a lot of different areas all around the coast. So there's a wealth of different habitats included. and some coastal areas. So we're really excited to see how that develops in the future, and really important to have that highlighting the wealth of marine and coastal biodiversity that we have there. So why Tralee Bay? Why are we looking at Tralee Bay? I'm going to hop back here and jump into the designation. So Tralee Bay has been designated as an SAC for all of these habitats, which is quite a long list. So it has the dunes, it has the fixed coastal dunes, it has the sea cliffs, it has the reefs, shallow inlets and bays, it has coastal lagoons, estuaries and mudflats. And otter is one of the species that it is designated for. And I'm actually not going to talk about any of that today, which is quite funny when you think about it. We're going to look more at the elasmobranchs that are found in Tralee Bay and why Tralee Bay is important for those. So this really started for me, well, I was going to say in 2024, when I started as biodiversity officer, we developed this project that's partnered between the Irish Elasmobranch Group and the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group, who have been absolutely fantastic in driving this work, developing the project, and then of course running the project, conducting the research and carrying out the community events as well. This is funded through the local Biodiversity Action Fund with the National Parks and Wildlife Service and Kerry County Council. And so the grand title for the project is Building a Strategic Alliance for the Management of Marine Biodiversity in Tralee and Brandon Bays. So why are we looking at Tralee? I suppose the key thing for coastal communities in Tralee is the Tralee Bay oysters. So we have a local oyster fishers co-op that is very sustainably managing one of the last native oyster beds, or the last fished native oyster beds in Ireland. So it's really incredible the work that they've done in taking on board suggestions and looking at how to manage it to ensure that that continues on for our coastal communities, and obviously that the oysters themselves are still present, still reforming and still recruiting. We also have dolphins. So we've had bottlenose dolphins. The Irish Whale and Dolphin Group have kind of recorded them moving down out of the Shannon and setting up home around here in Brandon Bay quite regularly. This lovely skate here this is an ungulate ray. So that's one of the ones that are very common in Tralee, but not really found elsewhere. And there's a number of ray species that can be found in Tralee. And then another key species that we'll talk a little bit about is the angel shark. So the angel shark, often locally called monkfish, is still found in Tralee Bay here, but its population nationally has been in a lot of trouble. It's massively reduced in numbers to historical records. So there's a lot of interest in conservation for that species. So how did we find out that Tralee Bay was so important for the rays? And this is something that I actually started working on. Mariana mentioned it in the introduction, the Purse Search project with Marine Dimensions that I volunteered on when I started my career. And that asks people to citizen science all around the country to find these egg cases on the shore and to send them off to Marine Dimensions. Initially, you actually had to wrap the egg case up in a bag and post it to Marine Dimensions. Now I think you can take a photo and submit a photo. So it's one real positive thing that's come out of having really good cameras on our phones now. We can ID them based on photographs. So there's a number of skates and rays around Ireland that lay eggs as their breeding mechanism rather than giving birth to live young. And these egg cases, so the young would develop inside the egg case, but once it's fully developed, it swims out the end, and the egg case then is sort of left discarded, and they often wash up on beaches close to nursery areas or within a certain distance of those nursery areas. So when the project reported, after 10 years of these reports coming in from all around the country, you can see there's a really good spread all around the country. And this map here shows all of the egg cases reported. So this is all of the species that were reported and all of the locations. But when we delve into that further and we start splitting it out species by species, for some of the different ray and skate species that we're looking at, you can see that there suddenly becomes a real preference for Tralee Bay for some of them. So we have the blonde ray, the white skate, and then of course the ungulate ray here, which to our knowledge is now only found in Tralee Bay. So it gave the Irish Elasmobranch Group kind of a heads up that Tralee Bay is really kind of an important area. Another project that happened, and this was supported by the Irish Elasmobranch group and really driven by Louise Overy. I really have to mention Louise, she's fantastic. She runs this project. I did try and get her on today, but she's actually out on a boat doing surveys. So I couldn't really pull her in off the water considering how important her research is. So unfortunately, I'm a sorry second fill-in for you. The Angel Shark Project hopes to help safeguard this species for generations to come. And part of the work that they've done is looking at the historical records and trying to identify if there has been a population crash, which clearly there has. There's a much reduced population now. And they're also working with us on the Tralee Bay project to do some survey work to see if we can encounter angel sharks. They've had a lot of success in the last couple of years. And there's been a lot of news reports I hope you've seen. This one, I think, was in the Irish Times, where we had 2 angel sharks tagged off the coast. I also should mention the Marine Institute here because they are doing a huge amount of research in Tralee Bay as well. And they have the baited remote underwater videos happening. And they also have some stuff going on with the tagging where they can tag certain species, and then they can record where they're showing up within the bay to give us an idea of how these species are using different areas in the bay. So really great to have the tags on these species because it shows us how they're moving around the bay, which is something we're not really aware of. We're not really aware of where they're regularly feeding, where they're regularly breeding. So really important information comes from this. Some of the bad news stories then, they're known to be so rare that they're saying marine scientists go an entire career without seeing one. And Clew Bay and Tralee Bay have been highlighted as really important refuges for them. And just last year, actually, we had an angel shark that stranded. It was stranded on the beach. And so it was taken in, the MTU facilitated having like an autopsy done on it. So they were able to learn a lot about its biology and what kind of things it had been eating and things, which is really amazing because we don't often get the chance to do that kind of work. So part of the project alongside of, so the whale and dolphin group are doing whale and dolphin surveys. The Irish Elasmobranch group are doing some of the grub surveys, looking at the underwater habitats and the species that are coming up to these baited cameras. We're also doing a whole raft of engagement with the local communities. I mentioned the oyster fishers co-op before, and they're obviously really embedded within the community there and have been doing fantastic work. So we're trying to reach out into the wider community to get information out there about how important the bay is and how valuable it is, and then to encourage them to sort of start these conversations around what do they see as being meaningful for the future of the bay. So some of the events have kind of focused on research in Ireland. We had Luke Cameron from Trinity College Dublin, who worked on the Shark Island project just last week down, giving a talk, which was fantastic. And Jack from Fair Seas, which I think is in our next webinar in this series. And over the last couple of years, we've had various events bringing the community together to discuss different aspects of what life in a coastal community is like and how the fishing is impacted, how recreation impacts it, how visitors impact it, and how we can kind of work towards having better management in some of the areas that require it. And we've also brought over experts from other areas where they've had similar projects running. One example is the Lyme Bay MPA, where we had a visitor come over from there and speak about the experience, which was really valuable for the local community to kind of hear how that process can happen somewhere else, what the difficulties were, what the barriers were, and what really positive things came from it so that we can work towards having positive actions ourselves. The next thing, I'm going to stop talking so much for a little bit next, and I'm going to play a little video. So the video was put together by Louise, and this is from some of the underwater video stuff that she's been working on. So the last I spoke to her, I think she had 6,000 minutes of video. So Louise is also working on a PhD looking at angel shark conservation. So the footage you'll see is from Tralee Bay, and she has conveniently highlighted some of the key species in the video. There's no sound on the video, so don't worry if you don't hear any sound, but I'll try and highlight some things as it goes through. So the BRUVS survey, the BRUVS, this is what the BRUVS are, and I know Anthony has been using a type of BRUV as well, and I think there's probably several different models, but this is the one that Louise has had. So there's a GoPro camera on it, and there's some bait, and it essentially sits down on the seafloor for, I think it's up to 90 minutes, and records the video of what comes up to the bait. So straight away, you can see some of our lovely seagrass habitat there. Louise assures me that there's 3 different species of fish swimming around in this video, but I'm not sure I could identify them all out myself. And we have our lovely spider crabs clinging onto the bait there. And a dogfish or a lesser spotted cat shark floating around. You can also see a tiny little hermit crab in the bottom if you had keen eyes. Now this guy here is a nurse hound, so he's a little bigger than the one we saw in the last video. They also lay eggs to breed, so you can find their egg cases washed up. You see all of the hermit crabs here. This is pretty amazing. And then just over on this side here, we have a painted ray coming in, if everyone has noticed that. So now this is our ungulate skate. So these are a really beautiful fish. And they're frequently referred to as the tiger fish in Tralee. So they call them the Tralee tigers because of the patterns on the back. But those are the ones now that we think are only found in Tralee Bay around Ireland. Of course, our spider crabs are coming again. Very curious. Now I see a thornback skate coming in here. Just on the left-hand side there, here he is. Thornback skate are another of our egg-laying species. So they're found all around the coast of Ireland, though, as far as I know. So you might have those off your local coast. Another ungulate skate making its way in from the top here. Now this is, you can see that, that's an angel shark coming in there. Got scared off by the dogfish. Now we have a lobster moving in over here. And a conger eel. And you see how beautiful the colouring on the conger eel's tail is. He's going to whip around just now. Oh, and this is the weaver fish. So we often experience weaver fish in a really negative way by stepping on them at a low tide. So yeah, really cool to see a weaver fish swimming around and not causing some problems. And now here's the footage of what we've really been hoping to catch, which is our angel shark coming in. So he's just sitting over here. So angel shark are a flat species of shark, and they live on the seabed. They're ambush predators usually, so they like to bury themselves in the sand and then spring out and catch what's coming past. They're, I think, the second most endangered group of elasmobranchs in the world. and they're often found in shallow coastal waters, which explains why Tralee Bay. So he's here again, if you can make him out. Explains why Tralee Bay is such a good spot for them. Came in again there. So all three sightings that we've had on the Bruv sample have been an adult male. So it's possible that it is the same adult male coming up and investigating the Bruv every time, or it's possible that they're different individuals. At the moment, we don't know, but they all have been adult males, so it's possible it's the same one. Another unusual species that we have found in Tralee Bay is the stingray. So these are usually more of a tropical species, but they are found in Tralee Bay. So you can see them here feeding. This footage was taken. Louise was actually snorkeling, so that's why it's a little bit shakier than the last bit of footage we had. But she's been in snorkeling and she recorded, I think, over 20 stingray in one location as she was snorkeling around. So again, a huge thanks to the National Parks and Wildlife Service for funding the research and for letting us get under the waves. I know in that video you saw both seagrass and a lot of our seaweed species, and I know that Anthony is going to be talking a lot about those in his presentation. So I'll invite Anthony on now and I'll pass over.
So thank you, Eleanor, for that powerful session, and it's been very good looking at some of the life. I'm also going to share my experience with some of the things that relates to seaweed. So I say welcome, Akwaba, in my language, as we say it. I'm going to talk on the topic life among the seaweed farms and ecological interaction in Irish coastal waters. So seaweed farming, generally the aquaculture of seaweed, is seen as a very friendly form of aquaculture compared to traditional aquaculture like finfish farming, shellfish and the likes, due to the fact that you don't put in anything, whereas the other forms of aquaculture, traditional culture like fish, involves putting in feed and the likes. So it is globally seen as friendly based on the fact that seaweeds are able to remove nutrients and are able to also attract a lot of different types of biodiversity, even though the purpose of seaweed cultivation is for the biomass, but it serves in the end also sometimes as food for a host of other organisms and also the habitat for different marine organisms. So the main objectives of this research, the first one is to assess the effect of seaweed farms on the seafloor. So even though we're talking about the fact that seaweed aquaculture is interesting, we want to see if having the aquaculture is very important and it helps in a way that it doesn't affect the environment. So the other objective is to also look at the biodiversity that is attracted on the seaweed. As I mentioned initially, the idea is to get the biomass, but it ends up attracting other organisms that I will talk about later, and also estimate fish that are attracted towards the seaweed farm. So mostly we have the interest on megafauna, that is fish. So this research enlightens us a bit on some of the macrofauna as well. So the study is done in three research areas. That's one is Lehana Pool in Connemara, and two in Kerry, at Braintree and Castletown. So the Lehana one is an integrated multi-trophic aquaculture that cultivates salmon and seaweed. and the other two are just cultivating 2 types of seaweed. So the popular seaweeds that are cultivated are Alaria and Saccharina. These are all native seaweeds. These are cultivated for the purpose of biomass. So for the first objective, I'm trying to, I researched on the topic, as I mentioned earlier, the first of seaweeds on the seafloor. So using spatial and temporary gradients of natural and also the farm to understand whether there are any impacts. So with the spatial monitoring, distances, different distances from the seaweed farm, under the farm, at the edge, and 100 meters away, as well as a control area to compare if there is any farm effect, for which we compare with a control area, which is a sandy habitat. And also, I want you to bear in mind that our seaweed farms that we have seagrass below. So we wanted to also see what is happening within the environment. Is the seaweed farm impacting in any way, or what other things are affecting the impact of the benthic organism? These are these small organisms that are found below in our sediments, and these are naturally occurring organisms. So temporary analysis also of the benthic flora to see if there is also any effect that relates to season. So we, according to the harvest of the seaweed, we have about 5 surveys starting from September 2017 to April 2019, where we have it displayed there. And I have the grab here, which is the equipment that we use for sampling. So you see the hand there. So we use it for sampling sediment just below the seabed. Even though it's very difficult to get to the seabed, this is an equipment that you hold it on a boat that you can use it to get sediments, and for which we sample the benthic species from. So these are the results. So for the benthic species that we identified, so I give you a bit of abundance, which is in relation to the density of organisms that are there. So if you look at it for the 3 transects that we looked at, the control, as I mentioned, is a sandy habitat, and it had basically the lowest amount of the organisms that we measured. And if you look at it, the down current, which is the green, the orthogonal south, which is farm transit with seagrass, you see that at 100 meters away with the orthogonal south, it's higher. At the edge, is going down. So it goes down at the lower under the farm. With the down current, it's rather the opposite. It's under the farm that you get a higher diversity. So in this case, for the seagrass that we measured, the seagrass also followed a similar pattern. The seagrass was highest for the orthogonal south in the same pattern, just as the organisms that we are seeing here, along with the benthic diversity as well. It follows the similar pattern that the diversity was increasing in the same pattern as the abundance. So with the control, it was the minimum as well. So in this case, the main take home from this research that we're getting from the spatial impact is the fact that we didn't identify any impact. Basically, the organisms that we had were mostly benthic dwelling organisms that are usually found in seagrass and sandy habitats, showing no effect of the farms on the floor. So with the analysis that we did, there was no difference in biodiversity in terms of comparisons from away and under the farms. So it means the seaweed farming had no impact on the environment, just as you see in the analysis that I'm showing here. So it showed no significant impact when it comes to the distances. And you see some impact when it comes to the surveys, showing that there are some spatial distance, temporary and seasonal changes that happens, which is normal, which is something that is not strange. And within the transit, there are some differences, which is imposed by the fact that we are comparing seagrass beds against sandy beds, which is natural. So in that same way, we have the temporary, as I mentioned, fluctuating, and the diversity and abundance fluctuating in that regard. So the main impact that we see are generally the differences that is caused by the seagrass availability below the beds, and also the seasonal effects, and also a possibility of organic enrichment, probably by the seagrass, the kelp forests that are there within the environment, as it's also where we cultivated it. And also probably our seaweed, even though the seaweed our results shows no impact based on the organism that we had, that we didn't get any opportunistic organisms, but there's a possibility of having some organic deposition. But based on the results that we had, it looks like it is very minor, and the seaweed have a way of reducing it just based on its bioremediation ability. The second work that I did works on the biodiversity, as I mentioned already. So we worked on two types of seaweed, that is the sugar kelp, and the other one is the Irish wakame. And we took 25 centimeter length of the long line that we are cultivating to look at the biodiversity that are on it. So we had a huge amount of taxa, about 143 different taxa, and per every seaweed that we had about 95,000 biodiversity or individual fauna that we sampled on it. And these are varying organisms from amphipods, caprellates, and all these organisms are organisms that are fed on by pelagic species like fishes and other big animals that we found in the environment. Also, it attracts a bit of wild seaweed as well. And you see sea squirts, bryozoans, and mussels, which are all organisms that are fed on by fishes and other bigger organisms. So in effect, the seaweed farming that we have is turning as a food for other organisms in any way, even though the interest was for the biomass which we are working on, but it suggests that it creates a complex habitat, as we see here, that the mussels is degrading the seaweed all the same, but it's still helping in a way because the fishes will in turn come and eat it and enhance the biodiversity. So these are some of the organisms that we identify from the seaweeds that we got from the microscopes. And the main results is the fact that we have a lot of amphipods that we sampled from Castletown Bear, had the maximum amount of organisms from its maximum growth. The seaweed growth there was very good. And you could see differences of the various seaweed farms with this plot. You see the various locations separating, just similar to the dendrogram that we have here, that you see that each seaweed farm have distinct groups of organisms that they support, for which it is very important for the biodiversity that we are talking about, that each seaweed farm can contribute a bit of different dimension when it comes to organisms that they can introduce to its system that it finds itself in. Another research that I worked on is also using baited remote video camera, just as Eleanor described. With me, I use PVC pipes attached to buoys, and also the other setup was a T frame here, which it is the camera is attached to, which we put onto the seaweed long line. With this, we suspend it into the sea to see what we can get when it comes to the fishes that move around. As well, we had a bit of diving along the long lines to see organisms that we can get. We also put shrimp pod to see what we can get in a form of extractive type of sampling. So these are some of the species that we got. So we were trying to compare the controls, which are control habitats, which are kelp beds and also seagrass beds. We were trying to see what organisms that we can get there and compare with the seaweed farms that we have. So these are some rare species that we got, some dogfish, just as Eleanor showed. So these were found in the seagrass, and we have some squid and some eel juveniles. On the seaweed, we had wrasse as well. And we have some stickleback, some pollock, smelt, and these are some of the organisms that were found on it. So it tells you that the seaweed can, in a sense, generally also produce organisms similar to the natural ones that we have. So even though it is not the one of interest that we are just putting it there for the interest of the fishes, we're putting it there for the biodiversity, the biomass that we want, but the biodiversity that ends up on it helps up enhancing the environment. So it is producing a similar kind of habitat and food source, which the natural seaweeds that we have can also give, as we also saw in Eleanor's video. So you see this stickleback here enjoying himself, as well as this lungfish and this other pollock species. So you see a lot of juveniles here seeing and showing you that seaweed farms can create shelter and breeding grounds for fish, for which it is very important, especially during peak biomass where we have a lot of seaweed growth and you have fish laying eggs there and using the seaweed as a refuge. I have this small video here for this fish that was trying to, it's a snorkeling video. So he was trying to dodge away from the diver, and you can see that he was hiding, going inside and miss the diver. So it's showing the ability of seaweed farms as a refuge for organisms for which they can go away from predation in the case of predatory attacks. So we have this other one here enjoying himself. So just so I want to conclude in general, there was no detectable effect on the benthic invertebrates, providing the information that seaweed aquaculture has very low impact on the environment. And also, we have a high amount of microinvertebrate abundance and diversity compared to natural kelp beds. So what I showed you, even though I didn't show the full result, but if I give you the quantification when it comes to what I've been seeing in natural beds, you have high biomass of some specific macroinvertebrate like jasa, mussels, and the likes, which were in high abundance compared to even natural beds. So it shows how very useful the seaweeds that we put in the system can introduce food sources to the environment and make it important for the ecosystem and help in trophic the trophic balance for the ecosystem that it finds itself in. And the fact that the seaweed also serves as a habitat and a feeding and nursery grounds for fish species, as I showed you in the video. So in this case also as well a refuge function for the seaweed. So in this, what do we take home from this work? Seaweed aquaculture, like the natural forests that we see, like the kelp forest and the seagrass, these natural habitats are vegetated habitats that are very good for habitats provision and also food sources for organisms. It provides similar role, which in the case of this one, you see that it is a sustainable form of role, which is not impacting negatively on the environment and can help fishes and also enhance the general ecosystem health. So it created what we surveyed shows that the biodiversity associated with the farm is mainly influenced by time, harvesting, and the positioning of the farm based on what habitat is there. Like, let's say if we have seagrass or kelp farms and the likes, it will help influence the biomass that is there, but not necessarily the seaweed. So if anything, the seaweed rather will take things from the system and help reduce the impact of even some of these things, as I showed in the results. And also, we recommend based on this research that we can leave some of the long lines unharvested so that it can help keep some of the biomass that is left there, the biodiversity that could be used in the system for recruitment and to sustain species. So people who are involved in aquaculture can take some of these things and keep some of these long lines so that it will not affect the system and you take it completely away so that there is a way that it can regenerate in the system. Also, seaweed farms could act as a protection for seagrass. From the results, we could see the barriers of the seaweed farm, that's the under and the edge. The seagrass growth was better, and it seemed like it was it also improving water quality when it comes to the clarity. We did the irradiance and observe with respect to the seaweed edge and the under of the farm, there was clarity of water, and that type of clarity that it helped with is an ability that can help seagrass growth. So the improvement of water quality based on this function is very important. So it makes it very important for seaweed conservation, ecosystem conservation. That's when we want to put seaweed farms, we have to think about the habitat and how we put the seaweed farms in the environment. So I'm very grateful for the support from my supervisors and also the Marine Institute for the help when it comes to the sampling area when we sampled at Lehanapu. So I say Ayuko to my supervisors and Medas. Thank you for having me for this presentation.
Thanks a million, Anthony. That was just phenomenal. And likewise, Eleanor, a real deep dive, excuse the pun, right into some of the ecosystems that we have. And I know there's a big Kerry connection there, which I might jump back into later. But at the moment, we're in the middle of the UN Decade on Ocean, or the Ocean Decade. We're also into the middle of generation restoration, or the nature restoration laws coming in Ireland as well. And I think the research that's being carried out in the marine area is incredibly important in this. Some of the topics that have come up throughout your presentations kind of remind me of what's there now. We're researching what's there now, what we haven't looked at before. But do we know what was there in the past? And I think shifting baseline syndrome is a term I'd like to introduce here, maybe to both of you to have a look at from your own perspectives. Are we seeing differences in kind of some of the marine ecosystems based on the species that you're studying? So Eleanor, in your case, in the angel shark research end and the marine protected areas that you're looking at within Tralee Bay, has there been shifts there over the last 10, 15 years? And then jumping to you, Anthony, as well for a follow-up on that with what you might be seeing in the seagrass and seaweed harvesting areas as well.
Yeah, so I can get started with that one. That's the big question, I suppose, looking at the shifting baseline. And I suppose I always start with like, where are we starting from? You know, I mean, 10 to 15 years is quite a short space of time. If we go back further, if we go back 30, 40 years, we can look at pictures from angling competitions in Fenit Harbour and around Tralee Bay, where they were landing angel shark, and they were landing significantly large numbers of angel shark. And we obviously didn't have any conservation concerns around the species at the time. And so there was no concern about these things continuing. I suppose it was a fault of us as humans that we never expect the bad things to happen. Or we just didn't know, you know, we didn't have that knowledge. We didn't have any research to sort of inform those kind of behaviors and that extractive nature in which we approach the ocean. So definitely from those, if you can take those as a baseline, we're definitely seeing a massive reduction in populations now. I think over the 2 years you're looking at it, what is it, over 6,000 minutes of footage, and we've recorded angel shark 3 times, and it's potentially the same angel shark. You know, when you think if in one day of an angling competition they could land 40 angel shark in a pier, that's a massive reduction in what. If we didn't have any reduction in the population, imagine how many we would be seeing on these cameras that we're sitting in the bay now. And I think that can be kind of echoed across a lot of the research that we do. I know some of the fisheries protection stuff records the bycatch numbers. And so we're saying, oh, well, we're recording really low numbers of bycatch, which is fantastic because we're not targeting that species. We don't want to catch them. But also, are we not catching so many because there simply isn't that many there anymore, you know? And so it's a really hard question. It's a really hard question to answer from a scientist perspective. And how can you get, you know, specific numbers on things, and how do you measure a decline in a population that we can't? You know, it's not like it's a plant that stays in the same place and you know its habitat, so you can go and count the individuals. Like, these species cover huge areas within the ocean, and potentially use different habitats in different locations, could be traveling to other areas in Ireland that we're unaware of, or offshore that we're unaware of. So definitely it's a complicated thing to highlight, but it's definitely something that we are facing. I think in the context of biodiversity, generally, it's really easy to see the impact of that, where people now will say, oh, there's too many bugs, or there's too many wasps this year, or too many bees. But you and I both know from the research that's done, we've had an 80% drop in insect biomass globally. So what we're perceiving now as being too many bees on a hot summer's day is absolutely not enough bees at all compared to what we previously would have had. So yeah, I think part of, I suppose you're the same in the same role in Waterford, and part of what we're doing is trying to highlight this, in that yes, there is still biodiversity there, and we absolutely need to conserve what's there. But in a lot of cases, conservation isn't enough. We really need to be moving towards restoration, and restoration of species and habitats, because there's things that we don't know we've lost because we haven't been counting them. And so there's a massive amount of work to be done there from an education and awareness perspective in getting that message across and encouraging people to be sort of aiming a little higher in their in their actions and their objectives.
Yeah, totally. And I think even in the ocean context, where you're looking at shifting baseline, because so much of it is under the water, out of our sight, we actually don't really relate to it, even as an island nation, which I think is phenomenal. Like, all of our past is based on fisheries. And if we go way into the cultural aspects of that, you need good fish stocks to be able to feed an island. And we're looking even at some of those commercial species, like you're mentioning. Angel shark being called monkfish is probably something people don't associate with each other. And even just having that bit of knowledge from your talk can do a lot in going away and actually looking at what you're purchasing or where it's coming from. And kind of on the sustainability side, Anthony, I might jump over to you. You mentioned sustainable aquaculture and the importance of that. And I guess when we're coming into shifting baselines, the importance of restoration of habitats, especially when you're looking at fisheries, is leaving some behind for the biodiversity that needs it. And I know you mentioned there about leaving some of the long lines behind. So even looking at that, could you explain a little bit on the seaweed farming side of things and how that can support the goals towards marine restoration and increasing some of this biodiversity within the marine area?
Yes. It's a very good point. So, just as I mentioned, the seaweed farms are cultivated for the purpose of the biomass, but in as much as we want the biomass, but if we can go along with ecosystem-based approach of harvesting, where we leave some long lines there, just as you saw the mussels on it, when you have some of these organisms growing on them, it also attracts other organisms which form a complex niche, which can help in restoration. And even though it might not be the best, it might not be the full solution, but it is something. It helps in a way attract a lot of biodiversity, which can also improve and enhance the ecosystem. So restoration through the addition of things like seaweed cultivation, oyster farming, or like some of these things, organisms that form habitat for other organisms are very important when we want to think about sustainability.
Absolutely, yeah. And just a question I have myself, have you come across on the browse, because you're both using them, have you come across any unexpected species within either the seaweed farm areas or again off the shore in Tralee Bay, Eleanor, in your case? Are there species that we're seeing there now that may have not been there before in terms of changes to the ocean or anything like that?
In my case, with the fishes, not necessarily most of the species were okay within the same zone that is supposed to be found. But with the biodiversity, where the long line work is where we identify some invasive species like the Caprella mythica, which originally is from Japan, but it's now almost all over Europe in most of these aquaculture sites, which we don't now, for now, nobody has done any research on the impact on the environment of some of these species, which even though they are invasive, they could also be food for other organisms. So it is difficult to understand how their impact comes in when it comes to the general ecosystem effects.
Yeah, thanks a million. You both also mentioned communities and working with either community groups in terms of NGOs or local communities in an area, or again, in the fisheries and working with fishers. In terms of community action, do you think there is any actions that people can take in their general everyday life in terms of either citizen science or things that they can change in their own life that will help some of the areas that you talked about today? Eleanor, I might hand to you first there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was gonna jump in. I was like, wait, this is I would love to answer this question. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't remember who did this quote, maybe it was Sylvia Earle or someone like that, said every action that that you do has an impact. And so you have to choose what kind of impact you're going to have. and you can take action. So just to focus on the coastal communities, the marine habitats around Kerry, we have a number of groups who are just incredibly engaged in taking care of their own place, sort of minding their own area. And this includes really well-organized groups that are taking on large projects, like the Maharees Conservation Association, for example. That is a community that came together around protecting their local sand dune habitat on the Maharees. They've done chestnut fencing, they've done they've done marram grass planting, and then a host of community events where they've engaged with people outside of their group and really brought the community along with them. And Martha Farrell, one of the members of the committee there, who's been a really key person in driving this, she often says when they started, she was like, sure, I hadn't a clue what was there. Like it's just the sand dunes, you know, you're there your whole life, you go there in the summer, you enjoy the beach, and you go away and you don't think about it. But when they started doing these coastal walks and biodiversity walks and learning the names of the different snails and birds and things that were using the dunes, and then offshore the different species that we're finding in the water, suddenly there was a connection there, and they've become so sort of proud of what they have and really willing to take care of it. And I think that's kind of an important part of the journey that a community group can really push within their local area. You know, I think both of us are in the same position. You're a biodiversity officer, you cover a huge area with a huge remit. It's very hard to get down into every single community. And these community groups are absolutely vital in taking that action, not just in knowing their own local place so that they can highlight changes or concerns that are happening so that we can then potentially direct conservation measures, but also in the process of taking those actions. So the marram grass planting, the chestnut fencing, the education and awareness around our coastal communities has been absolutely fantastic. Outside of that, it's about looking at where you're getting your produce from. You mentioned it earlier about looking at if you're buying fish, where are you buying it from? Is it a sustainably managed fishery? Is there a better option out there? There potentially is, you know. And it's kind of taking that care to kind of stop and think before we take action. And then absolutely your activities around the coast. I recently spoke to someone on a local beach who a friend of mine introduced me to, and he had noticed, he was really interested. He had a rib, he went out, he did a little bit of lobster potting, and a lot of people were interested in lobster potting. Suddenly everyone is out catching lobsters, and he was like, well, this isn't going to be good for the lobsters. So he has taught all of the local boat owners there who are just visiting for the summer, you know, this is just a hobby, they're not commercial
Yeah.
fishermen to any degree, and they're just taking a lobster home for dinner. But he's taught them about measuring them, returning the ones that are too small. He's taught them about identifying females. He's taught them how to V-notch them, so if you catch another female, you know it's already been caught, return it to the water. And the impact that's having just on our little local beach is phenomenal. You know, there's one person had said to him that they caught over 60 lobsters this year, but they only kept 5 because of what
Yeah.
he taught them about the sizing and the gender identification for them. So when you look at that level of community action, that's an impact there that can't be done by one person in an agency or an organization. Like we really do need these sort of community leaders minding their own place. Yeah.
I can 100% get behind you on that. I think community groups, and especially taking action on the ground, you don't have to be an expert, but you can call the experts in to have a look at what you found. And I think the citizen science end of things at the moment is a place to be where you're going to find community that will have different knowledge and share that knowledge with each other. And the power of a community group to change the outcome, even for one location, that knitted together has massive impact. I know, Anthony, on the research end of things for you, science communication has become such a huge part of what people do as part of their research, because we can look at all these amazing things and we could gatekeep them, and it's happened for eons within the scientific field. But there's such a lovely emphasis now on getting your research out there and chatting to people and seeing who would be interested in getting involved. And I wonder on your side as well, where you find kind of some of the nice interactions that you've got based on your research, and where can you distribute that more? Where can people find out more about what you do?
So yeah, is one thing that I always have a problem with when it comes to science and communication and the general public. Mostly we go to conferences, have publications, nice research, and it's just all in the books. So the way to get about the information to the public, like some of these sessions are very important, and how we communicate, just as Eleanor was saying, to the people. Like as you have the research, as you talk to people, just a word of what you found can make a difference to somebody's life. Just showing them what to do and what relates to your work when it comes to the environment and what they find within there, it makes it easier. So it's our way of life also that we can educate people through it. It's not necessarily talking about the things in conferences and having publications. It's just the people that we meet, that how we communicate with them and educate them on our research interest and our findings as well.
And actually, I think it's phenomenal. Like, we're all about inspiring people on this webinar. And even just seeing the footage that both of you have shown from Brovs underwater that some people have never seen before. It's a very privileged place to be underwater and to be able to see things, and to share that with other people is even better. It inspires people to protect areas. And I guess I'm coming into a couple of final comments here, and a couple of questions for you guys. I have two, so we'll end on the fun one, and I have one a little bit before that. What do you think are the current actions that people can take if they were to take 3 actions today for the ocean? What are the top 3 things that they could do, whether that is a podcast recommendation, a book you might look at, an event to get involved in your area? What kind of 3 things do you think people could get involved in? Eleanor, I'll jump to you first there.
3 things. Okay. So I'm going to start with action. Take action. So there are the Irish Wildlife Trust, there's the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group, there's the Irish Elasmobranch Group. There's a number of other groups around Ireland that you can join that will facilitate you getting out and, as you said, like enjoying the privilege of being able to experience different habitats, and to learn about what's there, so that you can share that knowledge, but also just for your own joy, that you know what you're working towards protecting, which is a really important part of it, and staying inspired in this work of working towards restoration and conservation. And so definitely getting involved with a local group, whether it be like a national organization, an NGO, like I just mentioned, or whether it's your local tidy towns group or your local coastal community group. Taking physical action in your own community is absolutely a fantastic way. It connects you with people, it connects you with the habitats, and it will help to keep you inspired and moving forward. There is an amazing podcast that one of our colleagues in Offaly works on, Ricky. He does the In Your Nature podcast. I would recommend listening to that. He covers all topics about nature in Ireland. They're very witty, and they're really interesting, and they're a great listen. I spend a lot of time driving to different communities around Kerry, and I'd love to have that keep me company in the car, and I'm still learning things on the different topics that they pick up, so would definitely recommend that one. And then the third thing I think would be that idea of considering what your impact is. So whether you choose to use safer chemicals in your home or safer cleaning products to reduce your impact on water quality, whether you're reducing your plastic consumption by taking a water bottle or a reusable coffee cup, or just buying your food from a farmer's market or a local health shop rather than getting it plastic coated somewhere. These are all really positive actions. And I think when we're talking about individual action for things like that, it's the cumulative effect that we're hoping to achieve. So if enough people are going to stop buying a certain product, it's not going to be for sale anymore. If enough people, like with the plastic bags in the shopping, if we all stop using them, they're not there anymore, So there is ways that we can collectively have a massive impact. And it might feel small that I just took my water bottle today and I refilled it once, so I saved 1 plastic water bottle. But there's over 4 million of us in Ireland, so that's 4 million bottles if we're all doing it. So keep in mind that even though sometimes it feels small what you're doing in your day to day, the accumulative impact of that with all of the people that are doing it is what's important. So to focus on that and keep going.
Amazing. That is exactly what we need. A little bit of a push towards getting more curious and getting involved. And it doesn't matter if you've not got the experience before. It doesn't matter if you're not usually a marine biologist. You don't have to be to get involved in these things. So over to you, Anthony, for your 3 things that you think people can do to get involved, maybe in hearing more about research, or is there podcasts out there, or where can they find out more about what you do?
Okay, so for here in the MFRC, we during the school, when the semester begins when school is in session, we have these weekly sessions that we have for which people can also relate to some of the things that we do. Even though it might not be the best, it's a means of communicating our results to the general public and also the scientific community, for people to understand what we're doing within the research facility and also generally outside in the research that we find out. And also when it comes to the three things that I think I will give as a take home to people who are online here. The first thing is, if you are doing anything, just first think about the harm that you are giving to the environment. So whatever you are doing, think about what harm it will cause to the environment. Is this harm going to restore the environment? That's another thing. And the other point is it sustainable enough? So whatever you are thinking about or whatever you are doing, think about the harm you are causing to the environment. Will it restore or destroy? And also, is it sustainable for not just for you, but for the other person that is supposed to come in the future?
Oh, let's leave it on that one. That was the perfect ending. Absolutely. Generational, what we're leaving for the next people behind us is so important. And even though so small, sustainable choices can make a huge difference because you pass that knowledge on. On saying that, thank you both for a lovely session. We've learned quite a lot, and this is actually going to go out to even more people afterwards. So your word will be spread further. I'm going to hand over to Mariana now to close out, but we're delighted to have had you as guests today, and thanks for taking the time to put forward your research.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marina, and thank you, Anthony and Eleanor. I know how difficult sometimes is to connect people, normal people like me and many of those who are as attendees today with science, with heavy science, but this was a lovely way to connect that and to share a few actions and ideas we can start working on, even though we are not scientists or we are not specifically people connected with biodiversity, which is the aim of this webinar. And if you that are looking this are interested in keep following us, a topic that is really connected with this is marine protected areas, and that's going to be the topic for the next webinar on Not Stopping Now. We're going to be talking the 17th of September with Taisce, and they're going to be talking about why marine protected areas are so important and what are the policies we have in place and those who that we need in the future to keep creating this hotspot for biodiversity. So if you're interested and you want to keep following us in Not Stopping Now for the ocean, we're going to share on the chat the Zoom link for the next episode. But if you don't get it, don't worry. We're going to share the information on an email in later today. So Eleanor, Anthony, and Marina, thank you very much. We also going to share with you in an email you're going to receive soon the feedback form. So we appreciate if you can fill that form because it's going to help us to keep improving for the following episodes. And with that said, thank you very much. See you next time. And let's gonna work for the ocean in the rest of the year and keep enjoying the Heritage Week. Go to the website. You have a lot of things to do. A lot of actions all around Ireland. So if you're interested in doing something today or this weekend, go to Heritage Week. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.